Joined now by former Vancouver Canuck TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado. How are we doing, Frankie?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
Fantastic. You were roommates with Bo Horvat once upon a time in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Bo Horvat you know.
Oh man, I'm such a fan of Bo Horvat. I know it's one of those things right now where people are getting ready to boo him or not to boo him. I see stories on Twitter of people saying, Bo was such a good guy when he was here, all that kind of stuff. I'll put it to you this way. Bo Horvat wanted to be a Vancouver Canuck and nothing else for the rest of his career. And I think that speaks volumes to the commitment that he had to the city, to the team. And I know we talked about it last year, but he really was molded by some of the best players and people to ever roll through that organization. I'm obviously talking about the Sedin twins, among others. It's unfortunate the way things ended out, but Bo's a classy guy. He's such a good person to be around. He's always been a great teammate. He showed a level of maturity from such a young age upon getting drafted into that organization, and he just grew into this star for the city, star for the team. Obviously the captain, he bared a lot of responsibility through some tumultuous times there. To be honest with you guys, I can't say enough good things about the Bo Horvat that I know.
He's so old school that I think that was the problem for him, wasn't it? They didn't sort of, and this is over the top, but they didn't deify the captain part of it and say, okay, we got to lock this guy up. Like, I think he thought, as the captain of the Vancouver Canucks, that they would just fall over themselves to lock him up long term for the rest of his career.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't even know if it's fall over themselves. I just think it's like just give it the time of day. Like make it a priority. Why did your captain have to be a non-priority when you're going down this road? And I think the thing that rubs me the wrong way about it is, he was a fairly young captain when he was named captain, although he had been in the league for a long time and experienced a lot. He was surrounded by incompetence within the organization. And it's not just Bo that fell victim to that. There were other people. We knew, the scouting staff led by Judd and guys like Dan Palango. Like those were guys that kind of fell by the wayside here, like good people who did a very good job. And Bo was one of those guys that, in a time where the team lacked any kind of direction of where it was going or what it wanted to be, Bo had to go out there and face the music every single night. He had to answer all the questions, the tough questions. And, I think they got their flowers when they deserved it, obviously in the bubble, and Bo was spectacular there. Outside of that, I have a hard time coming up with moments in time in Bo's tenure where things were just going fantastic for the Canucks, where it was like you just roll out the captain and it's like, things are going great. We're all doing well. Bo had to answer to a lot of incompetence within that organization. So I feel for that. And within that, he still always wanted to be a Canuck. Like, I don't think that was ever, that never wavered for him. He always wanted to be a Canuck. He always wanted to be in this city. And that's, when you see the way things played out and he goes to the island, and I know everyone talks about that post-game interview. For me, that's not directed at fans. No player is ever going to direct that at fans. He was loved by the fans when he was there. He loved doing things in the city. He always committed his time to helping out with various charitable causes around town, which obviously is a prerequisite to being a captain. But when you're kind of, for lack of a better term, dumped on your way out the door because of the incompetence around you, it's not a great feeling. Would he probably want a mulligan on what he said post game? For sure he would. But I think as a Canuck, he conducted himself very professionally and always wanted to be a part of that city and a part of that team.
We all thought him a goody two shoes, early to bed, early to rise, make sure he gets his daily quotient of vegetables. Was that the guy Was he that sort of old school, old soul?
No video games?
Yeah, no video games on the road.
I think Bo's one of those guys that never took a day in the NHL for granted. And I bet you he still doesn't. He was so dialed in. Guys be trying to get him to go out. It's like, whoa, if Bo's going out, like that's crazy. You don't see that very often, right? Like he's very, very dialed in, very committed. took his off ice stuff very seriously, and he was just like such a, I don't know, such a wholesome kind of guy, right? Like he was, he was with his girlfriend and they were married, and there was just like right from day one, they kind of just immersed themselves into what it means to be someone who lives in Vancouver, and for him as a player, what it means to be a Canuck. And yeah, he was such a good example. Like you talk about role models and leaders, like he fit the bill for that perfectly. If you were a parent of a young kid, you could look at Bo and say, like that's a good example of what it means to be a professional hockey player, a great leader in the community. Like he checked off so many boxes in that regard. Like and you can probably interview other guys that played with Bo over the years, and I'm pretty sure they would give you the exact same review.
Help us out with this then, Frankie, because this is what I see a lot of from the Canucks fan base. He was clearly a leader by actions. He was clearly a leader by words. How come more players didn't drink from what he led them to?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Obviously, if you're not privy to the dynamics of the dressing room, it's going to be hard to answer that kind of stuff. I would say it's in hockey players' nature, especially ones that are currently playing, to just kind of be tunnel visioned and focused on what you're doing, and not necessarily feed into whatever narrative. Like you don't see too many guys come out with bold statements, and that's why when it does happen, it catches headlines. I think of Quinn Hughes, talking about the Tanner Pearson injury and the headlines that caused, because that was a very bold thing. Yeah, so no one comes out and has like this glaring or glowing review or whatever. And I understand what you're saying about drinking the Kool-Aid, but it's just one of those things where I feel like guys are just reserved. They're in their own world. They're doing their own thing, and you learn pretty quickly as a hockey player, regardless of who you play with, their stature in the league, people come and go every year. There's so much turnover every year. So your buddy leaves, your captain leaves. It's like, hey, it sucks for a bit, especially if you're close with the person. But someone else is coming in, and you guys got a job to do, and it's go time, and you don't really have time to think about it. I can't tell you like how many names of people I played with I have in my phone, and I mean, we don't keep in touch on a regular basis, but if you reached out to someone, be like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" You could have a 30-minute conversation on how things are going. That's just the reality of the amount of turnover there is every year in the NHL within your team.
Well, I just, by way of follow up, was he too perfect, Frankie? Like, did people look at him in the room and go, "Ugh, you got to be kidding me. Like, this guy is just
Too straight.
too straight, too narrow, all
Yeah,
that."
I don't see. I don't have a problem with that personally. Maybe there are guys that look at that and say, would like to see a show a little more of a discombobulated side. Maybe you're not so prim and proper for everything. I don't mind that. Like if I'm looking at a guy who's a leader, I want him to be that. I don't want him to be somewhat of like an unfinished project. So I mean, everyone's got different taste. I think hockey players, you come across so many, as much as we seem so vanilla in front of the media, you come across so many different personalities within that. And so yeah, not everyone's cup of tea. But if I'm looking at people that I want to be leaders, I want guys that are dialed in with what they do on an individual level, and guys that I can look to in times where games maybe aren't going well, and it's like, I don't know, that guy looks like he's dialed in. He looks like he's ready to rock and he's in the fight. I never got the sense from playing with Bo or being around Bo that he was a point the finger kind of guy. Like I think you guys used the term old school a couple times throughout this conversation so far. For me, Bo is the kind of guy where it's like things aren't going well. I'm taking that upon myself. Like that's an accountability thing that I think he had. And like I said, the incompetence that was around him, the tumultuous times, he wore that. He wore that as a guy who wanted to hold himself accountable before holding the team accountable. That's not easy. Like that wears on you, and that has effects afterwards.
The leadership, the button down leadership of Henrik and Daniel didn't seem to affect Kevin Bieksa and Ryan Kessler's. Didn't cramp their style anyway. So I think you can probably have both. The last piece
But
of
the
it,
culture changed a little bit. The culture changed outside of the room.
For which
Well,
for which era?
we're in the age of the anti-hero
Oh,
here.
yeah, maybe.
Are you a big Swiftie?
Wow, exhausting, Frankie, rooting for the
Let's get to the last piece, the financial piece of this. And only Bo knows whether or not he would have accepted less than what he ultimately got with the New York Islanders. But does the economics even work here for Bo Horvat? He makes more than JT Miller does, only by a smidge, but it is more. And it's one more year than JT Miller ultimately got as well. We know Philip Roenick's going to be getting a raise, probably not above Queens, but it's going to be it's going to be up there, but not above 8.5, which is what Bo's costing anyway. So, does something need to give? I mean, it would have to be JT Miller or Bo. You would think, but was there another way to wedge everybody in here and then still take care of defense, which, of course they wouldn't have Philip Roenick without the Bo Horvat deal.
No, it would have been very difficult. And I think when you're looking at these contracts now, you have to look at percentage of the cap. And I think Lou is brutally honest, Lou Lamoriello, that is, when he said it's too long and too much money.
Right.
But what are you going to do? Because if you don't want to pay guys money, then have fun having no players and being a bad team every single year. So sometimes you do have to chew on it, and you got to pay guys what I guess their market value would be, and that's what his market value was at the time. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of like snap judgments based on the game tonight in your market, based on how he performs as a New York Islander. And to that, I would say this: they're not a good team. Like, their numbers offensively are poor. Their numbers defensively are poor. Luckily for them, they have two very good goaltenders, and their goaltenders keep them in games. So if you're going to watch tonight's game and look at Bo, and I already know I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to see the tweets like, oh, thank God we kept JT Miller over Bo Horvat, and hindsight, all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, Bo's still a very good player. He's playing on a team where there's not much going offensively. And if you were to insert him back into the Vancouver lineup, I imagine his offensive output would be much better. There's also something to be said for going through what Bo went through and being thrust into a different organization and what that does to your on-ice production. Like, I know, you go over there, things can go really well at the beginning sometimes. Like, I think Bo did tail off quite a bit towards the end of the year. Like, it got quiet there. It's just one of those things where if you were so locked into and so bought into a certain team and how things are going there in the city and all that kind of stuff, sometimes it is hard to get your kind of bearings going and get that production back where your new spot is. So I would say, like, let's caution a little bit here before tomorrow. I got to see all the hot takes from #Canucks Twitter.
But he's on a good points pace on a terrible offensive team.
A 70-point pace on a terrible team is
not bad.
Nothing to shake a stick at. The problem, if you're doing the head-to-head, is that Miller's turned into a point per game player plus, and this year at the very least has turned into an excellent defensive player too.
For the Canucks, that softens the blow so much. The fact that Miller's really embraced this shutdown role center kind of guy. Like, if he wasn't that, then we'd be talking about Bo is the one that got away. But credit to JT, and we talked about this last week, I believe. Like, he's really embraced what he's doing now with this team, and that solves a lot of problems for them, because if that wasn't the case, there would be a glaring hole in the lineup.
Just the momentum. Are we ready to move on a little bit? Bigger focus here. The momentum of this team, Frankie. That Toronto game was not a proud moment for them. The last two periods, they did not play well.
Oh yeah, I sorry.
Do you remember that?
I know you got asked something. What'd you think of my Maple Leafs? What'd you think of them? I know you guys don't watch them very often. What'd you think of them?
I think they had a nice night that night.
Here's why I don't watch them very often. I'm still working at 4 p.m. Okay, Frankie?
I don't
spend my work at 4 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah, no, all I hear coming out of Vancouver is that people in the East don't stay up to watch the Canucks. I'm just wondering if you guys watched the Maple Leafs, so you had a chance to see them Saturday night. That was, by the way, that was their best game of the year. They saved it for the Canucks.
I think they should pay William Nylander $13 million per year. That's what I think.
Whew, man.
Cap themselves out on Willie Nylander. That's what I'm looking for.
I got a lot of Leaf fans in my mentions talking about how the Canucks schedule was soft and that they're. I mean,
it was.
It's still 11-3-1, I believe,
Yeah.
is better than 8-5-2.
Fair.
It's simple math. The Canucks, though, the night after, of course, after having lunch served to them for the first time in a long time, they sort of just played a more disciplined game. It ends up being a 5-2 final on a crazy final few minutes, but it's a 3-1 game effectively. Does that tell you something that you need to know about this team? The ability to sort of rein things in after suffering a loss and just play a simpler game?
For sure. And I think, sometimes when things are going well, as much as you don't want to admit this, there's going to be a game around the corner where you're like, man, it's just not going to go our way. It's just not going to happen. So that's Saturday night in Toronto. And I like the way they bounce back against Montreal. Montreal is one of those teams that's overachieving right now, and they're sneakily competitive every night. Like they gave Calgary a good run last night. They're sticky. They don't give you a ton of freebies. So I credit Vancouver because they roll into that game. They take care of business. And it's one of those things too where the Canucks usually do these trips on like 2-week intervals where they go, rattle off like 7 games in 14 days. It's kind of nice for them to do a short little trip like that, get your 2 wins, go home. Like it's a nice little change of pace. But yeah, I would say that the ability to bounce back. And I think that obviously comes from the coaching staff kind of implementing a certain mindset and game plan as far as how we're going to approach things after a loss and not letting things compound. I think that's so important, right? Like within the game, you don't want mistake after mistake to compound night after night. Like let's put that behind us and get after it the next game. I think they did a really good job of that against Montreal, and that's a good road trip for them. As far as the schedule goes, like I understand like strength of schedule, still got to win the games. Like you can lose any game any night in this league. Edmonton lost to San Jose, so you got to play the games.
And you don't
quite
choose it.
frankly, the schedule looked a lot more daunting before Edmonton started shitting the bed before Nashville.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Like
right.
we weren't talking about it being a soft schedule at the beginning of the year. It's just a lot of those teams, particularly San Jose, haven't been very successful. That the Canucks
3
have
versus Edmonton. If Edmonton is
No,
their
exactly.
normal selves,
Exactly.
you're in awe of their
Yeah.
wins.
Lastly, what do you make of the 3-on-3 overtime proposal to either a shot clock or prevent teams from coming back out to regroup once they've gained the blue line?
I like the regroup rule, like almost like the over and back rule in basketball. I'm a big fan of that, but I'm preaching complete and utter chaos. That's where I'm at with this.
No offsides.
No offsides. I think we just go wild, wild west because here's the thing. We're already playing a gimmicky thing. 3-on-3 is gimmicky, is it not? We used to do 4-on-4.
Yep.
We went to 3-on-3. It's a gimmick. It's been a resounding success, if you ask me.
It's a tiebreaker.
From an entertainment point of view, it is outstanding, Frank.
It's outstanding.
But it's a tie-breaking mechanism. It's not trying to replicate hockey. It's a tie-breaking
And
mechanism.
other sports have crossed. And other sports have crossed this threshold. Football, we give you the ball at the 25. Baseball, we're putting a runner on second base. So you're well within
there. We're already there with the gimmicks. It's not realistic to play like 3-on-3 until someone scores with the way the rule. It's just not going to happen. I am personally still a fan of the shootout. I find it exciting. I know I'm in the vast minority there, but I think we get rid of offsides, maybe even get rid of icing. I don't care. But let's just make this complete and utter chaos and see how it looks. They used to do, actually, so when I was in junior hockey, the NHL used to do like a research and development thing where they invite a bunch of the draft eligible players and they bring people from the league and they run through all these kind of, scenarios and make the young kids perform and do it. Do that. Let's do like a 3-on-3 tournament with no offsides, no icing, see how things go. I'm all for this. I am banging this drum. Chaos.
Okay, so I like everything that you're serving up here. What's the penalty, though, if you take it past center? Because a lot of people have been like, okay, well, you don't want to blow the whistle and halt the momentum.
Yeah.
Or just make it a 50-50, face-off. A lot of people have said, do you give them the puck?
Do you have to just give up possession?
You just got to give up possession like beer league, like the
beer league,
the old timers do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which will look weird.
That's why I think you just get rid of the offsides.
Yeah, less furious.
So I'm with you on shootouts. You and me. It might be a club of 2, but I'm with you on shootouts. I'm here. I'm picking up what you're putting down on overtime ideas. I was getting a little worried for you when you started puffing out the Eastern media chest, but you brought it back to the Wild Wild West, Frankie.
I love
Thank
it.
you for that. Thank you for today. More next week. Look forward to it.
See you guys.
This great clip brought to you by, wait for it, Great Clips. It's going to be great.